This is episode 191 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Randal McLeaird. Randal is the founder of Ridgeline Investment Group, and they have over a decade of experience consistently delivering value to investors through strategic acquisitions and management. We'll get into what type of assets those are, but Randal, welcome to the show.
Jonathan, thanks so much for having me on the show. It is good going through your list of guests and seeing who you've had. And so I feel honored to be here. So thanks again for having me on.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it because I was on your podcast and then I was like, oh, I always meant like we were trying to get you right back on. And then, of course, the email happens and it's buried in there somewhere. But I'm glad we've swung it so I can return the favor because I had an enjoyable time talking to you. So let's do it again the other way.
Sure. Let's rock and roll, man.
Yeah. So let me know. I think that your first kind of aha moment for real estate started with a book. Which book was it that really got your juices flowing?
I mean, honestly, it was like so many. It was right after I graduated college, I went to work for a buddy of mine, right? And he gave me a book. He was a mortgage broker, and this is 2004.
Yeah.
But he gave me Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I had always wanted to get into real estate and didn't know exactly what aspect. Initially, it started in college, and I just didn't have any money. So, but I always wanted to buy a house that all my friends could live in, and we would do that thing. So anyway, when I got out and I kind of saw what he was doing, what he was working on, and how he had already amassed some assets, not a bunch, but he had some toys, he had some houses, he had condo, he had some other things. But it was, Rich Dad Poor Dad, like so many other. But I think, when I think about that question, it's always like that. I don't know. There's about 50 to 100 other books that I've read. That like you get the itch, and then you read all these other books on like how to. It's funny because I think really now that I say that, there's a pamphlet that I got that was just like I can't even remember the guy's name, but he came to speak at a RIA. And he handed out this pamphlet, and it was like how to do a rehab, and I was still trying to figure out my place, figure out what to do and where to go. And it was so cut and dry and so simple. He was like, this is what I do. And he had some, the VHS tapes that came with it. He's like, this is what I do when I walk a property. I look at this, where does the water fall? And he just walks through and did a whole walkthrough on a property. So that's probably the one that like actually shaped me the most, because that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to do rehabs. I know how to walk property now. I know what to do. This is what I'm going to do. And that was very helpful, just seeing some of the stuff that he was doing.
So small multis in Texas, that's an interesting conversation topic because the bigger companies aren't buying those. So there's an opportunity there, I think, for those mid-range numbers, that are, 10 to 20 units in Texas, because there's so many 260 unit properties in Texas that you're really buying against regular buyers a lot of times. So if you have more experience, you have more leverage over them to win and know the due diligence portion of those smaller multis.
Yeah. I'm still having a hard time getting to, a bid ask, if that makes sense. So that's one of the things one of the challenges that we're seeing. But still, I like that. To your point, going and buying a 250 unit complex, you're going to have partners on the deal, and you're going to have a lot that goes into that. And you're competing with institutional funds that have been sitting on the sidelines for a while, waiting for, a dip in the interest rates or waiting for something to happen so that they can just deploy all the capital they've got sitting on the sidelines. So I've seen an uptick in the deal flow on multifamily. And so, hopefully soon some of these things are going to start to make a little bit more sense.
Yeah. I mean, San Antonio has been a market that's been consistently growing for years. And as a whole, Texas is still on the huge scale up, even though rents across the state are a little bit down.
Fantastic. I know there were some guys coming out of the ground. Not that way, but yes.
It's also specific to Texas. So, it's like in 2008, it was like, man, Texas is getting killed. And now during the syndication mess ups that some made, there's a decent amount of them in Texas because there's just a lot of opportunity there. So there's people who bit off more than they can chew, I think, on, debt rates and things like that weren't going to really work out for them.
A lot of free money and a lot of population growth. So helped fuel a lot of new construction, a lot of new deals, new syndicators, maybe.
There's these regular home buyers who think like everything's a forever home. Of course, that's fake. You get a job transfer, you just leave, get another home. Like, they're houses, they feel like homes when you live in them, but you can live in a rental and it can feel like a home.
For sure.
Like you have to really understand what real estate is. It's a vehicle. I was just posting something too, and I'll get your take on it too, because I think it goes into this conversation that like it doesn't, the house that you live in is always a great investment if you do it right. So the way that real estate investors are taught in like social media world is like, you got to get a duplex and then a triplex and then a sixplex. But like they forget about the houses that you can live and enjoy a house and then also crush it on the appreciation. I mean, a lot of my whole career, I just bought really nice houses that I lived in. And then I did some value add either on the front end or the back end. I think that's like an underknown asset class. Your own home is an awesome investment, especially if you make it look nice.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those things that we kick around. We're like, okay, we need to do X, Y, and Z. And should we put it off when we're going to sell the house, or do it now? We get to enjoy it. Like, we should do it now. Like, let's go,
Yeah. Well, because I call it back flipping. I've a couple times lived in the house. It was a nice house, but then I would buy another place and then move. And then I would like flip it to modern standards, do a couple more things. But then I bring my kids back, or my friends are like, what? Now it looks sweet. I'm like, it looked pretty good before. Like, I just want the money. But that's a fair point. I think that's always,
I like that. Yeah.
It's a good discussion to have though. Like which things, like doing the kitchen, I think you get a lot of enjoyment out, and it's also a huge value add, but also you don't want to do the kitchen and then stay 7 years, because then you have a 7-year-old kitchen. So you really like thinking as a house flipper and somebody who wants to make money on their own house, you do have to consider these things as a family. When is the right time? We don't like, I've been in houses that people are trying to sell and they're like, oh, I renovated this kitchen. I'm like, what year? They'll tell me the year. I'm like, that's 22 years ago. Yeah. Bro, that's old. It looks like old now. It's not new.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a really interesting thing. And I just think that people discount the fact that if you're doing house hack, like you said, the first thing that you want to do, you can also enjoy that. You don't have to live in a basement unit, with 5.5-foot ceilings. You can live in a nice unit and just maybe not make as much money. Like it's okay to enjoy where you live. That's why real estate is awesome.
No, not okay.
No, you live in that attic unit with no air and no stove, and you just use a hot plate as an adult. Like just
you gotta do what you gotta do until you can do what you want to do. Don't you know the saying? Yeah.
Well, how has it been though? Like, everybody who has a family, we're always saying like, is the family on board? Does everybody understand that like, hey, real estate is a vehicle? And that's a really important thing for everybody. How's it been for you knowing that you can have that discussion with your wife and say like, hey, let's agree. Like at some point we're just going to move.
Yeah. I mean, I think she's on board. She's all on board. She quit her job and she was working with us, and now she's full-time mom in it and volunteering to do all this stuff. Right. Yeah. And so, but she knows real estate and she has done her own flips, and she has, awesome. She's on board for other houses. So far, she hasn't been on board on our house, but we'll get there. But having family involved, like my brother's working for me, my wife was, and so like it's a family thing now to understand real estate and invest in real estate, and just kind of knowing that is a vehicle.
I think if you're a good home buyer, then flipping is a more viable option because you're limiting your mistake. And like you said, it's appetite versus risk. What are you up for? But I don't feel like people should be like, well, I'm just going to DIY this by looking on YouTube and get no permits and think they're going to sell it, which is, what the same as we're seeing kind of wholesalers not know what we're doing. We're still seeing that amount of flippers who, they're quitting in the middle or they're putting out a product and you're like,
I have seen a lot of that, man. I have seen a lot of that lately.
I've seen something there's like, oh, full renovation. I'm like, this literally looks like a house I wouldn't even buy, to lipstick flip. It's such a piece of junk. Yeah. And they just like the conception of it. And look, to be honest, some of them are still selling because there's so many desperate buyers in our area. But we look at them and we're like, whoa. Yeah. Like, are you serious? Like it makes it harder for us to flip that way.
I mean, so again, if you're buying it wrong, then that's when you get in that situation, it seems like, right?
Yeah.
But my advice and the way that I always looked at it, and the reason I wanted to rehab to sell is because then I have a product and I can control the quality of that product, right? I can myself, no matter what, control that. And so, you want to make sure if you're going into a rehab that you have a quality product at the end of it. because you can rent it, you could sell it, you could keep it, you
Right.
could live in it, you can whatever, and it has value. But if you have a rehab that's halfway done and you run out of money, or
Yeah.
you know, it's like you don't have a sellable product. That no
Yeah.
one is going to buy that for what you think you could sell it for. Like, well, I paid 100 and I put 50 into it and still halfway not done. No one's going to give you 150.